Hi, this is Suzanne in Ohio. I'm back to finish up this project of these fabric roses. Cleaned up a little bit of my station, and we just have a couple steps to do to finish it up. So this is part 2. So here was what we made in the last video. And we made our foundation with some lace scraps and a little scrap of an applique off of a dress that was found at the thrift store. If you didn't see that video, go back and watch the first one. It is long, it's about an hour, but the parts that take too slow for you, just fast forward it until you get up to the end near where we put the rose on the foundation, and that'll tell you lots. So all we have to do to finish this up is think about how we want to embellish it here at the end. And I was giving some thought to it. The first thing I remembered was I showed you this gold mesh product. I said I don't know what it's called, but it's just gold fibers all pressed together, like melted together. And I tore it, and I love the look of it torn. So we are going to put some little snippets of that just to see what it would look like. And then to carry that gold theme throughout this project, I've separated out some beads in shades of pink, white, gold, and a few green ones. Now, we'll just use a few of those, but I put them out here to have them ready for our project. So the first thing we want to do is think about what this needs. If we add a couple little snippets of this, and I told you that dress had, the shoulders on the inside, the straps that are big loops that hold the garments on the hangers. So that was a beautiful piece of a real silky seam binding. So I made a little bow out of it, and I thought we'll use that. We'll put it on here and just tack it down and let it be part of our whole composition. Now, the other thing it needs is some greenery. And I showed you this. This is eyelash yarn, but it's the fluffy kind where the little fibers just go everywhere. Just lovely. And so I told how I tuck it under the edge and just tack it under the edge of the petals. So we'll do that to have some greenery. But it does need some leaves. Now, I've got 2 pieces of green here to audition. And because this whole thing is so delicate, I'm going to go with the lighter shade of green and very little of it. But you can see that if you have a bright red rose, such as this one here, you might want to have a darker leaf, and just use your common sense about it, what you like, and anything goes. So we're going to cut a snippet of this fabric off, and I'm going to keep these so-called leaves very small because this thing doesn't need much. And what I'm going to do, because of the rule of 3, I'm going to put 2 little tips of leaf coming down here and 1 up here. So I'm going to go ahead and fold this into thirds, and that makes my job easier. And I'm just going to cut a leaf shape out of here, just the tip of the leaf, because I don't want a whole leaf showing. This thing's too small and too delicate for that, for my liking. Keep it in, and then those will stick out too far, so I'll just cut a little bit off the edge. Now I have 3 leaves, and I want to make sure I drag my fingernail along the edge to kind of tatter them. And then while you were gone, I threaded a needle with green, and I could have used green thread, but I used 2 strands of a green embroidery. So we'll just tack those leaves in with green, and we'll tack them in such a way it mimics the veins on the leaf. So I'm just going to get a pin here to help me, and all I'm going to do is lift up the edge of those and see how I like that. So that's pretty fine. Straighten it up a little bit coming out from the center of the rose. And I'll put 1 over here. Now I might be doing this out of sequence because I still want to put some of that gold, but I want to see where the leaves are before I decide to put where I want that little fibrous gold product. So we're just going to lift this up and cram this little tip under here, and there you have 2 leaves. Now those are coming down too straight like a pair of legs, so I'm going to tilt them a little bit and get them like splayed out. So, and actually they would look better overlapped. So let's do that, and twist that one just a little bit more sideways. Whoop, I'm losing my curvature here, hiding spot. I could have done this before I stitched down those petals. Would have been easier, but do you think I remembered? No, I didn't. Forgot. We just want them under there enough to hide themselves. Let's turn this one sideways, and if I don't like it, then I'm going to recut it. Better. Perfect. Okay. So we'll stitch those down with the thread from, let's see. I hope I haven't went and lost it. I tend to knock things in the floor. There it is. My needle threaded with embroidery floss. Just 2 strands. Keep it nice and delicate. And then let's see, where do we want this gold? Just a couple little fibers. So you can see I tore off a little piece, and what I think I'll do is tear it even again and just barely get some fibers. And I think I'll tuck some coming down under that leaf. And then we'll do some over here, coming out from under the side of that rose. And then because of the rule of 3, put a very small one up here. Rule of 3, I should say rule of uneven numbers. Because your brain is much more comfortable with things in 3s and 5s. I don't like that one. So what could we do with that? I should have thought about putting some under this, but I didn't. So let's just take that one away, make it smaller, and put a very tiny piece coming out here. You hardly know it's there. Okay, so that looks pretty good. Now this little bow that I made, sorry, I'm out of frame, that can go at the top, and then our beads. So that's all we have left to do. So I've already threaded and put my knot in this embroidery thread, and I'm just going to try to hold these things in place until I get them tacked in, and then we'll move on to the beads with a different color thread. I'm just going to take about 2 stitches in every one of these leaves, in and out, to look like right in the place where the vein would be, and then jump over here to this one, and that one is sneaking out from under the edge of my petal, but I'll push it back in with my needle just like that. So back down, and come back up in the same line that the vein would be, and then take 1 more stitch. I like the tips of the leaves to kind of curl up, and sometimes even gather them slightly. Excuse me. And then you can roll an edge of them backwards to look like they're curling, whatever you want to do. So I don't want to turn that over to make a knot, so I'm just going to restitch 1 more time. That's almost invisible. I don't want to turn it over because some of the stuff that's just laying on here might fall out. And then I should not on the back, cut, and come up here. But because it's not going to show underneath, and I'm precariously holding these pieces, I'm just going to travel up and then 2 little stitches in the line of the vein. All right, now I feel like I can turn it over, and I'll just knot that off. And if I was real particular how the back side looked, I would have never done that. My thread came out, but I can still make a knot, and I'll leave a long tail on it. There you have it. Okay, so now let's just secure these little gold pieces, and all we need is a tiny piece of thread to do that. You could even do that with glue, but and there wouldn't be anything wrong with that. I don't know why I do it, but if I start out with everything stitched, I just keep it all in the same vein. And I'm just going to take a couple little tack stitches and stitch that, whatever that fiber is, stitch that in place. And I am going to turn it over and knot it, and then I'll travel up to the next spot. I forget that I'm stretching across this counter here, or this desk. So let's stitch this one. Swooped. Sorry, I got it caught on the corner. That pulled my other piece out of place. See? Maybe I should have resorted to pins. And I think I'll put a couple gold beads on these, right in on top of these pieces of gold. Or glass beads, I'm sorry. Gee, I forget what I'm saying. But so that'll secure them even more. And this teeny little piece up here. And that's good. Now, we don't want to forget our little eyelash yarn. So I am going to turn this over and knot it. And then, keeping the needle, we'll just lay some of this eyelash yarn down and see where we really need it. Don't forget our little bow's going to be up here. And we want this to trail, but we don't want both ends of it the same length. So just fold it, not in the middle, but somewhere close. And then we're just going to scooch it under the edge of one of the petals and get under there with a needle and stitch it in place. Yes, you're saying to yourself, that would have been easier to do before I sewed all the petals down. Yes, but I wanted do it on camera, and I couldn't do everything. So it was too long of a video. So I came back with this part 2, and we can improvise. So let's go over this eyelash yarn one more time just to make sure we've got it. All it takes is 1 or 2 tacks. It just adds interest. It reminds me of maidenhair ferns because, you know, and maybe they still do at florists, but when you would get roses, you would get fronds of maidenhair fern in with your roses. Oh, so beautiful. And my mother had maidenhair fern growing, and it's actually a viney type fern, growing on a trellis when she lived in Florida. It was just beautiful. Now I would ask myself, is that enough? And oddly enough, I think it is. I'm not going to use this second piece of eyelash yarn because that's just going to be too much, because we're going to have our bow. And I tied the bow, and then I kind of placed it on here just to see how I would like it. And I like it looking real natural and trailing, but this tail is too long. This one is fine, and I'm going to leave all the wrinkles in it because I want it to look very shabby. So I'm just going to come up here and I'm going to stitch right in the knot of the bow. Sorry, I've got it. There it comes. Okay. And then back down, and 1 or 2 times is plenty. We don't want to stitch it down so tight that it looks, too contrived. So I'm going to leave that loop in that tail, and I'm going to stitch this time just a tiny little tack stitch right along the edge just to keep it in place. And I love the loop because it looks like it's trailing naturally. And the ribbon is even twisted here. And the only thing I wanted to do was cut this tail off at an angle. And all I did was snip this right out of the dress. So that's why it's so wrinkled. And then let's give it one more little loop right there. And then I don't want to catch my eyelash yarn underneath. See if I can pick this needle back up. And then I'll stitch this time somewhere right here. Remember, keep it as natural looking as you possibly can. And sometimes I just talk out loud to remind myself, keep it loose, Suzanne, keep it loose. Okay, so let's knot that off. I've got too many strings under there for my liking, even though I know no one will ever see them. It's just kind of like my sister who does cross stitch. The back of her cross stitch is as neat and beautiful as the front. She doesn't travel with her threads. She even had some things framed one time, and the framer said that's the prettiest back work on the back side that she had ever seen. So let's scrunch this a little bit and go with the folds that are already in it, and maybe tuck it under that. No, I don't know. Let's just do that. Let's be brave and let the ribbon tell us what to do. And it's kind of folded up there, and we'll just keep it that way because it looks natural. And then this little tail, I think this is one, it's just too long for my liking because it looks like I'm trying to cram it in there. So I'm going to cut this off at an angle and let it flare out. There, I like that. Okay. One more little stitch, and I only want to grab one side of that ribbon. So I'm going to hold it with my thumbnail and come up from underneath. Okay, let's see if I caught it. Yes, I did. Okay, we'll just knot that off. Very nice. Nice little curvature to it, nothing angular. All right, let's take a look at it, make sure we're not forgetting anything. And the only thing we need now, we'll double knot this last one and put a few glass beads on it. So let's get rid of this needle. It's too short, and I have another one threaded. I think a skinny one that'll go through the beads. Yeah. Okay, so these beads that are brought out, we need to, I say this to myself, I need to use these very sparingly because this little piece is kind of busy, and even if you could see it in real life, you would see it doesn't need much, but just some accents to make it pop. So for starters, I don't know. It's anybody's guess when you start stuff like this. I just want to put something right here coming out from the edge of the rosebud. Now, I'll just start out. I pulled out some beads that are glass on the outside and have that gold lining on the inside. So I'm going to try one right there and see how I like it. That's fine. And I want to trail upwards a little bit. The placement of these, it's all up to you. It's whatever you want to do. Clusters look good, but single ones scattered out in an uncontrived pattern, that looks good too. And that's enough for right there on that little corner. Now you might be saying to yourself, what's all the fuss over all that little detail? Nothing, it's not worth it if you're going to be looking at it from a great distance, but if it's something you're going to see close up, oh wow. I like to make sure my details are. And there's my quilter's knot again, for those of you that wanted to see it again from the other video. So what else should we put? I think just a small cluster right down here, and we'll have enough. It doesn't need much. I think I will use a light green one and then a pink one. Now this is a heavier than normal thread. That's why I could trust it with the, can't find the bead I want. I can trust it with these glass beads because I know it's strong enough. Put a little pink bead right there beside that green one. And there you have it. Boy, I think I have to get a different setup. I've got to find a way to get closer underneath my camera or reposition my camera or something, because I tend to be pulling this toward myself so I can see what I'm doing, and then you can't. All right. So I think that's all we need on that little cluster. And if you watch the other video, you know how to make the rows. And those are just the final touches. Now you might say to yourself, what am I going to use that for? Well, the people that do shabby chic and shabby anything, shabby vintage, there are so many ways to use this. I might go back and tuck the corner of these leaves with invisible stitches, but isn't it pretty? I mean, and this little applique kind of surprised me. That just added so much when I thought it was going to clash, really. But I just love it. And you all know that you could take your seam binding and dye it. You could spray it with coffee. You could add some distress inks to it. You could get a variation of color so that it's not all one shade. But I wanted to do this start to finish, and I didn't want to take the time to do that kind of stuff. So there you have it, a little rose cluster just like the other ones. And there's numerous amounts of use for these. And I've said in many of my other videos, anytime you do a piece of artwork, whether it's something like this or paper, if it's not copyrighted, be sure and scan it and make an image of it, because you can always print that out and use it for anything in your journals. You could make your own greeting cards with images of that. There is just no limit to what you can do. So thank you for watching, and come back again soon. Bye.